Hey everyone, it's Paul here, and today I'm just going to give you a quick walkthrough of how to use Bias Amp 2 in Reason 10. Starting with a sort of basic setup and then working through to some more unique and creative ways that you can use the plugin within Reason's workflow. So first of all, I've got myself a little drum pattern here that I made using Toontrack's Superior Drummer 2. So let's just give me something to work with for the video. Now to set Bias Amp 2 up, it's really simple. First thing I'm going to do is create an audio track, and then I'm going to set my input channel. Now for most of you, you're going to be using inputs 1 or 2, as these are usually the high impedance or high Z guitar and instrument inputs on your interface. For me, my sound card is using inputs 1 and 2 as a virtual loopback for the screen capture audio, so I'm going to have to use input 5. I've just got my guitar plugged into a pod set to tuner mode, so it's basically acting like a DI box. So for me it's input 5, but as I say, for most of you it'll be inputs 1 or 2. And then I'll just go ahead and enable monitoring for the track. Now to add bias to the track, what I'm going to do is go to the rack view by pressing F6. I'll just grab this and move it into the next column. In fact, I'll go ahead and name this as well, so we'll call this Rhythm Guitar. Then I'm going to go to Effects, and in the search field just type Bias and drag Amp 2 underneath, and you'll see that it's automatically wired this up for me in the Insert Effects loop. Okay, so we've got signal going through bias, and obviously there's a ton of stuff here that you can edit. It's a little bit outside the scope of this video. So for the meantime, I'm just going to choose a preset. So let's go to Metal, and we'll choose the triple tread plate. So I'll just make a couple of quick tweaks to the front panel. I'll increase the gain, bring the bass down a bit, and just add some treble. And if I double click on the cab section, I'm just going to move the microphone closer to the center of the speaker to get a brighter sound. Okay, so that should do all right for now. I'm going to go ahead and lay down a quick bit of rhythm guitar before we start adding more effects and getting into some of the crazier stuff that you can do within Reason. Okay, so not the tightest take in the world, but it should do. So the next step is to start adding some effects into the tone and sort of tightening up that bottom end a bit. And this works exactly like adding any other effect in Reason. So for example, I can go to the rack view with F6, and then I'm going to use the Scream 4 distortion unit and just click and drag it in above Bias Amp 2. So now this is connected in series from the Insert Effects Send into Scream, into Amp 2, and then back to the FX Return. Straight away you can hear that that's really tightened up the low end of that tone, especially for the palm mutes and the lower tune stuff. Now I still quite like to use the noise gate that comes with Pod Farm 2.5, so I'm going to go into Bias and disable the noise gate that's built in. And then again we'll just search for Pod, and then choose Dynamics and drag it in above the Scream. And then let's just check it out with that stoppy riff to hear if it's cutting out all the string noise in between. So I think that works pretty well as a rhythm guitar tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in for a double track. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm going to show you the most common way first of all. So I'll right click and duplicate tracks and devices. And this will just create an exact copy of that effects chain for the second guitar track. So I'm going to record with this first, and then I'm going to show you a slightly different way that's going to save a little bit on CPU for you as well. And now I can head to the mixer by pressing F5, and then I'm just going to pan these out to the left and to the right. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool, but basically what's going on here is I've got two instances of bias amp that are basically doing exactly the same thing, and there's a bit of a smarter way that we can do this. So first of all, I'm going to go to the programmer, and I'm just going to save this as a preset, and you see here I've already got folders set up for various different types of presets. So I'll just call this bias amp to rhythm, and then I'm going to go ahead and delete these devices. Next, I'll go back to the mixer, and I'm going to control and select these two rhythm guitar tracks and hit Control G to send them to a bus. Now I can go up here to the Load Inserts button, and then I'll just navigate to where I saved that. And then lastly, I'm just going to tab around to the back of the rack and just make sure that both the left and the right inputs are connected. And now what will happen is bias amp is going to run in stereo mode. So apart from saving on CPU, it's also a bit of a time saver as well, as I only need to make adjustments to this one tone in order to affect both guitars. So I'm just going to go into bias and use the EQ module to add a little bit of brightness to the tone. I could also probably do with high passing this a bit as well. Now before I do that, I'm just going to go to the mixer, and for the rhythm guitar group, if I go all the way up to the top of the channel strip, I'm just going to enable the Insert Pre button, and this basically just ensures that the EQ happens after the insert effects rather than before. With this left off, you can actually use the EQ as a kind of tone shaping tool before it hits the preamp, so that might work well for you, but in this instance, I want it to go Insert Effects and then EQ. So now let's look at some other ways that we can bring Reasons devices into play. So say for example that I want this initial riff to come in as a sort of filtered out version. So I'm going to grab all of this and move it along to bar 9, and then control and drag this to create a copy. Now in the rack I'm going to go to Effects, and then we'll use the envelope controlled filter and put it at the end of the signal chain. I think I'll try it in bandpass mode to begin with. Okay, so something like that would sound pretty cool. So a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to set this to bypass mode initially, so the default state for this device is to be bypassed. Next, I'm going to alternate and click to create an automation lane for it, and then just draw in a new clip of automation that enables it for this beginning section. I'm also going to alternate and click on the frequency control to create an automation lane for it. Now the keyboard that I'm using is the Oxygen 61, and it's got a pretty generous amount of controls on it that can be mapped to anything on the screen or in the rack. So I'm going to right click on this and choose Edit Remote Override Mapping, and then just touch a controller on the keyboard. And then I'm just going to go ahead and record in that filter sweep. I also want this section to be in mono for the intro, so I'll go to the mixer and again alternate and click on the width control and then just draw in a blank part, and for this intro section have it set to 0. I also want to try something out on the last bar of the stoppy riff. So I want to kind of wah sweep there. So I'm going to go back to the rack and we're going to use another pod farm effect, pod farm wahs. And I'm going to place this after the dynamics but before the scream. Now again, as with the filter, I'm going to set the default state as bypass and then alternate and click to create a new automation lane. And it's really easy to move automation between lanes and devices in Reason. So I'm going to grab this enabled block that I used from the intro and then just use it to enable the pod wah for the final bar. And then I'll just go into the plugin. I'm going to press automate and then choose the wah position and then just draw myself in a sort of upwards ramp. And actually, I think that sounds a little bit unnatural, just as a completely linear straight line. So as I did with the filter, I'm just going to choose remote, press on the control, and then choose a control on my keyboard. And then I can go ahead and record that in a little bit more of a musical way. And then I think I'll duplicate all this and let's try a different effect for that bar on the second repetition. So this time we'll use the echo mode frequency shifter. And again, I'm going to automate that bypass state, borrow the automation from a different channel, and then automate the main frequency control as well. And I should be able to get away with just drawing in a ramp this time. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch more stuff that you could do to this tone. As I said, the sort of inner workings of bias itself is pretty much the subject for another video. Just to give you an example, if I double click on the preamp here, I'm able to adjust things such as the tube bias, so I could tighten the sound up even further by setting it to cold as opposed to hot. As well as choosing different tube types, power amps, different speakers, mics, and so on. But hopefully this should give you a bit of an idea of how Bias Amp 2 works within the context of Reason and how easily it fits in with the rack workflow and Reason's automation system and so on. Now I've got quite a lot to learn about this myself still, so there might be additional videos on this in the future. But for now, I think I'll leave it there and thanks for watching.